Today we are talking about employment and employability in the new normal, a risk that faces many people, not just in SA, but globally. For this conversation today, I'm joined by Wayne Bolton, Managing Director of Alpha Labour Solutions and Bridge Labour Solutions, Dr. Dennis Farrell, MD of Alpha&Omega HR Services, a business leader in the Eden District, and also an author of Employment Relations Management, Back to Basics, a South African Perspective. And completing the panel this morning from Johannesburg is Dr. Sharon Munyaka, Organisational Psychologist and MD of Munyaka Incorporated, based in Johannesburg. Sharon, Dennis, and Wayne, good morning. Lovely to have you on the webinar today.
Hi, Ross. Great to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you for making the time. Sharon, all the way from Joburg. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you.
Morning, Dennis.
Good morning. Trust you all well.
Absolutely. So employment and employability in the new normal. Before lockdown, labour consultants were already busy and Section 189 rumours were rippling across sectors in the South African economy. Pre-lockdown unemployment was around 29%. And if South Africans thought the grass at that stage was greener overseas, well, the World Economic Forum projected that Covid-19 may cost the equivalent of 305 million full-time jobs. In the US, we're seeing record unemployment move from minus 4% up to 16.1%, which are the latest May figures according to Forbes. In the UK, unemployment's gone from 4% also to 15%. And in countries like France and Germany, the companies are on short time, and up to 60% of companies are working short time. In Germany, unemployment has reached 5.8%. So to work, to eat, to have a roof over one's head, and to pay for one's basic physiological and safety requires a secure source of income. Unemployment, retrenchment, and redundancy cuts at the core of a human being's self-esteem and places limitations on self-actualization. It almost robs dignity and undermines self-value. When this is multiplied, it signals communities and nations that may never thrive if we're not able to sort the problem out. So let's take a look at the physiological or psychological effects of lockdown on businesses and employees. Sharon, firstly, tell us, what does an organizational psychologist do?
So thanks, Roshni. An organizational psychologist is in the business of people. So we are working to understand behavior in the workplace, and we work at an individual, at team, and at an organizational level. So the essence of the work that we're doing is, if we are looking at an individual level, we're saying, what is the best version of yourself that can show up in the workplace? What does that mean in terms of your own career plans, your career trajectory, where you are wanting to go? And what is the kind of support and the type of activities or education or training that you would require to help you be the best version of yourself? A similar approach would also be applied to teams, where we are saying, as a team working within an organization, what is the best version of this team? What are some of the things that we need to be considering in terms of the relationships between the teams, in terms of the productivity and managing the performance of that team? When we take it to the organizational level, we are looking at what type of organization you are wanting to be. So how are you going to show up within your particular sector? What are you going to be known as, in terms of your organization? Are you going to, be focusing on helping people? Are you going to be focusing on making sure your organization continues to learn? So our work as industrial psychologists then, supports organizations in that respect. Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon. So during lockdown, we were having a chat and just touching base, and you shared with me some really interesting insights from the work that you and your teams were doing with organizations, with business leaders, and also with individual employees. What were some of the psychological themes that emerged as a consequence of the pandemic and lockdown from your perspective? And then Wayne and Dennis, if there's anything you'd like to add to it, then please do.
So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can the host please enable me to share a screen? Because I wanted to just demonstrate the stages of grief that, we went through as society, being confronted, by lockdown. So we have, a woman called Kubler-Ross, and she came up with the cycle of grief. So in the cycle of grief, we are able to process what is this loss that we're feeling. So I think as humanity, we've experienced a great deal of loss, and people have processed this in different ways. So if we look at her first stage, she speaks about denial. So with denial, you might have heard in people's conversations that, this virus won't affect us. It's going to go away, or it only affects a certain group of people, or it's only going to be visible in different countries. So that's one of the approaches that people have had. We've also had people experiencing a whole lot of anger. So you are making me stay at home. You're keeping me away from my activities. I can't go and visit my family. I had a wedding planned, but I can't do that anymore. So there's been a lot of those very strong emotions that have emerged as a result of COVID-19. Another, emotion that has come up is around bargaining. So where we've had people saying, social distance for 2 weeks, everything's going to be fine, right? We're going to go back to normal. And even with children, you might hear them saying, so school is going to start, everything is going to be okay. If you just notice what's going on in your own vicinity, you might find, it's almost normal. And people keep using this term, it's normal. And that's part of trying to manage this loss that people are experiencing and saying, so how do we deal with this uncertainty? How do we deal with fear? And we know fear deals with our loss of control. We cannot determine the outcome. We don't know what's going to happen. So we have to make, some sense of the situation. Then we also experience a whole lot of sadness. And with sadness is where people are saying, I don't know when this will end. I don't know if my job is going to be secure. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get my clients back. So depending on where you are sitting, you might be experiencing all these different emotions, and they might be magnified in different ways. Another emotion that people tend to experience is around acceptance. So we have very pragmatic people who will say, you know what, this is happening. I have to wear a mask each time I leave my home. I need to sanitize. And we start to change our behaviors. So part of the themes that we're seeing is that people are coping in different ways. And the real work comes in all of us acknowledging that people are different. People deal with grief. People deal with adversity in different ways. So what do I need to do at an individual level? What do I need to do as a business to support the people that I work with? And then ensure that, people can cope a little bit better. So I'll leave it there for now, and I can keep adding in case the other panel also want to add something there.
Well, Sharon, thank you very much. It's quite powerful. And my mind moves to Wayne. Wayne, you're the managing director of two companies, one being a recruitment company, the other being a labor relations consulting company. And prior to that, you yourself have undergone and experienced retrenchment from a large corporate. Can you share with us those emotions and those experiences from both the employee's perspective, i.e. the person who's been retrenched, and also what that feels like for the business leaders that you've worked with in your space?
Yeah, thanks, Rosh. The reality is, and as Sharon was speaking, my mind was going to the situations around me right now where employees, almost all employees or most employees, have gone through some kind of an exercise at work where they've been waiting for communication from management, which has been, you might be on a retrenchment list. So you're going through a 1-9 process. You might be going through a salary cut. Anything from 20% to I've even heard 80%. When that happens, it's traumatic for the individual. A lot of the employees, especially at the lower levels, are supporting a lot of people at home. and we don't realize how far their money actually has to stretch. And suddenly, it's not just their future, it's the future of all their dependents. So they're the breadwinner, and suddenly they're now having to support more people who are also undergoing their own trauma and stress of trying to find money and so on. So just going through that process alone is incredibly traumatic, and employees are trying to deal with it. And I really liked what one of your hosts the other day, Paolo, spoke about, which was the pre-traumatic stress syndrome, because I thought that was quite cute. It's a fact, I think. It's like, we are living in fear of, I'm going to get the virus, somebody in my household is going to get the virus who's compromised, comorbidity and so on. There's the social fear that we're living in, as well as my own future, and financial pressure is a very real pressure. So anybody that's been through a 189 process knows how traumatic that might be. Your SMEs, and I can count myself obviously as one of those, it's a heck of a situation to find yourself in when you are trying to make ends meet yourself. A lot of SMEs that I've seen, to their credit, are actually, they've taken salary cuts. They're really trying to keep the ship afloat, and to their detriment, they are paying their staff salaries. It's really been so rewarding for me just to see that. But I feel for them. They have a very fine line to walk. Either they take a decision to say, I'm not retrenching, and the ship goes down with everybody, or perhaps they could save the business and live to fight another day. So they have this conundrum. Do they protect the staff that they work at, almost like family with them, or do they save the business, as well as dealing with their own personal issues? So it's really tough out there, I think, for both sides of the fence, Rosh.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Wade. So I'm always mindful about the very delicate balance between people and profits. And this is an unusual time where this balance and the vision of a scale almost comes to mind is a real one. And Dennis, I'm reflecting back on a statement that I was quite alarmed at. It was made by the SA Chamber of Commerce and Industry CEO, Alan Mokuki, early on in May. He said some lucky businesses will make it through this, but it will be at the cost of their workforce. What we are seeing is that businesses will not borrow money and get into debt to pay staff when they can simply be laid off and made the burden of the UIF. Most staff are not indispensable, so you can get rid of them and maintain the business when it needs to be reactivated in 6 months' time or whenever the economy can reopen. Now, I'm not entirely sure the context with which that statement was made, and most certainly, some businesses are going to take this opportunity to cut out the proverbial dead wood in the system, as they call it. But as we've listened to Dr. Munyaka, as we've listened to Wayne, this certainly does impact someone at the very core of who they are. We've already seen that the CCMA has received cases that affect about 28,000 people in the system. Talk to us a bit about the value chain effect of this economic devastation, Dennis, and then also from your perspective in the Western Cape, Wayne, your perspective in the Eastern Cape, what are you seeing amongst your clients? And Sharon also in the Gauteng area. So Dennis, if we can get your view on the value chain effect.
Yeah, maybe before I get to the value chain effect, just to, I've been in a corporate where we were 45,000 people, and we so-called right-sized it to 28,000. So, right-sizing or retrenchments, all this is not new. And most of us have been through it in some way or another. The very important part is that whenever you engage with people in these circumstances, forget all the fluff. All that person wants to know is what's going to happen to me. So as leaders, and I think this is where one of the differentiators come between a leader and a manager. A manager's response is, yeah, but we have to cut back, we need to do this. A leader will say, how do we take hands to work through the process? So what Sharon was referring to, Dr. Helen Kubler-Ross's framework, which is universally accepted for many, many years, and some things have been added. The important part is oscillation in that. So it's not a linear thing from starting, I'm in denial and going through to acceptance. You're going like this all over in that process. And the important part is that even for the organization, the people that make decisions, they need to understand where they are at any given time. So it's not a linear thing. I think that's important. I just want to touch on as well is that it's also become our accountability. I think we've been in a process of being in employment for too long. We need to look at the employability. How employable am I? So I've always said to people, people say, but I've worked at this organization. It's a big organization for so many years, and whatever the case may be. And we've all got this sense of false security, because theoretically, I can get 30 days notice. That's it. Okay. And then I need to go to Wayne and say, hey, Wayne, help me here. This thing was unfair. Okay, I can get severance pay and all of that. But we need to create the security within ourselves and ensure that we are employable as we go along and as the world changes around it. So those are just some comments from my side. But I think if we look at the statement made from Saki, first of all, we need to understand that the context, as you say. If I look at it blindly, then it sounds a very linear kind of thing, and it's what is said there is not necessarily wrong, but is it right? Is that how the leaders will deal with it? And I'm saying this within the broader, not knowing the context. So so it's difficult to comment on that one. But I think where we are right at the moment is that if I look at specifically the Southern Cape, now we did research, and effectively 38% of the business indicated they're going to be closing. And now, interesting debate is it because of COVID or is it because of the lockdown? And those are two different things. Okay, so, but 38% equates, direct impact on people. If I just look at George, it's around about 26,000 people, direct impact. So it's employees times the amount of average families. Now, can we get through that? So, how do we deal with it? So I think our accountability for me is working towards employability, understanding what skills we do require with the skills we have. So I've also mentioned in a previous session that we need to move away from this thing that everybody can work mobilely and we've all got the skills. We need to understand what skills we've got. And for those skill sets, so in our environment, we're sitting with a lot of farm, people with agricultural background. They could be farm workers that have now retrenched. But how do we get them into opportunities in terms of making them employable? I think that's a bit of a general statement from my side.
Yeah, that's a really important facet of it, is that in this time where everything externally is changing, and from Sharon we heard that internally things are changing too, and you're having to deal with this dynamic movement that's happening. Wayne, from the recruitment side, what are you seeing around what types of job opportunities are coming to the fore now? And with the skills base that we have who are underemployed or unemployed, do we have the mix or the match available right now?
Yeah, Rosh, obviously the recruitment industry is a bit of a bloodbath at the moment. I heard one of the very good international recruitment bloggers this morning, Greg Savage, saying that we're 5 kilometers into a 42K run. That's pretty much where we are in the recruitment industry. And obviously some sectors have fared better than others. Your food sector, obviously from your point of sale or from your production all the way through to your point of sale. Mining has been stable. Retail has been a disaster unless you sell laptops. They seem to be doing very well. Hospitality tourism, Dennis will know, architecture, construction, they're all in trouble. And so it makes you think, Rosh, what is the impact going to be in terms of the youngsters making career choices or study choices now? You think back to my dad's day, get a job in the government, it's going to be stable. Well, he was probably right now, because I don't think any government officials lost a job. It's pretty stable.
It's quite interesting. So the public sector workers from the cohort from healthcare and teachers unions are actually going to court this week because their salary increases haven't come through. And if you think about those who we consider to be frontline, it hasn't really only been the medical staff, it's also been those teachers who've really very quickly adapted, reinvented their teaching methodologies. It's been quite interesting. And you're quite right. Earlier on, you were saying in the private sector, what they're trying to do to sustain jobs is to take those salary cuts, experiment with what they can, and hold off those kind of bad news letters for as long as possible. Because, if we take the multiplier effect, one retrenchment could impact about 4 lives, right? Sharon, I was really interested to bring into this part of the conversation then what you were referring to earlier, the emotional experiences of denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, acceptance. When things are changing at such a rapid pace and you're needing to firstly secure a source of income, but also maintain your relevance, are these phases, do they move in a linear process, or how do you get from one phase to the other without kind of diluting the value of the personal experience and the process itself? How do you reinvent yourself?
So, like I said, people are individuals, and how we respond to adversity is going to be different for each person. So Dennis also highlighted it, that it's not a linear process. So some people might experience all those different emotions in a very short space of time. So, for example, someone might say, you know what, I get it, COVID-19 is here, I need to readapt, I need to rethink my skills. Then something triggers them and they get back into anger, they get into bargaining, or someone is just really consumed by sadness and they're struggling to get out of it. So people are going to differ. Some people will bury their heads in the sand, so the ostrich mentality, and say, you know what, I haven't seen anybody dying, so this is a very abstract thing. Social media calls it the Thomas effect. So if you come from the Christian, perspective, we're the doubting Thomas, and people are saying, until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. Right. So when you are constantly confronted with all these changes, it's putting a lot of emotional burden on people. So there's no stability. And this is where, as people, we need to find those anchors. So if you're a business, the anchor could be your values, right? So that is the one thing that you hold on to. So while everything else is free falling, we are going to continue, with integrity. We are going to continue with transparency. This is how we move forward. So it's also, the tolerance and the compassion that we need to extend to one another, because, it's not linear. I am feeling on top of the world today. Tomorrow I get the letter that says, sorry, we're not able to continue to hold you. And also the other reality that I'm seeing in organizations is the negotiation. So it's the managing of expectations, because if I'm an employer and I'm coming to you to say, look, we have to rethink our salaries. So the employee might feel like, why? I'm just here to do a job. Why didn't you make all the savings to make sure I have a salary at the end of the month? So there are those different emotions that could surface, or where retrenchment is coming because you've tried everything and you say we actually have to stop. So we have to be mindful that different emotions are going to come up, and self-awareness is important. So notice the changes in yourself, notice the changes in other people, and respond appropriately. It's not going to be a one fix all. You're going to have to be open, remain curious, have an open heart, and just trust that things will get to a place where we can all try and figure out something that's going to work for the business, for yourself, and for your family.
Thank you, Sharon. You've touched on a word that is so important in our society at the moment and in some spaces lacking, and that is trust. So there's an employer who has to make these really difficult decisions despite what's happening around us, and the employee on the other hand. Dennis, how do we bring the organizational culture into this? We have visions and values on our boards and our websites, and now's the time to really activate those, critically think about what those mean in a changing environment. Can you speak to us a bit about the balance between organizational values and that what a leader needs to do to sustain the business?
Well, the most important for me aspect is the values. Okay, but it's not the values that are just written up and then put up integrity or accountability or whatever. Because there needs to be a common understanding what that value means in terms of behavior. So how do I enact those values? Because the enactment of the values creates the culture of how we do things here, and that creates the climate of how does it feel like to be here. So where we are right now, if we do have a value of integrity, as a leader in the organization, we need to live that value. Because that's where you start building trust. So if we've got, a value of integrity, but I'm now conniving and I'm doing funny things here, people are going to see right through me. So the values is very, very important. Then if we look at just the purpose or the vision and the purpose. So, what is my dream? So we might have to, as business people, just revisit our dream to say, well, okay, our dream still stays the same, but how we're going to get there is now going to be changing. So we need to already start addressing that, or we should have already started addressing to say, but how are we going to get to this new dream? What are my new resources? How am I going to go through this? So a very good tool to use that is what they call the business canvas. It's free. You can just Google it. 9 questions that you ask yourself there, and you guide yourself through it. It's a very nice tool. I just want to add something is that retrenchments is not cheap. Okay. So it's not an easy way out for a company just to come and say, let's retrench people, because a lot of, even small organization, now you've got people that have been there with you for 10 years, 5 years, whatever years. That's money that you have to fork out. So as business leaders, we need to start looking differently and working with the teams to say, how do we avoid retrenchments? And that's partly of that is, okay, let's renegotiate, let's discuss different pay packages. I'm of the opinion we need to start looking at a risk-based remuneration. Okay, so we need to say to people, right, let's go ahead and let's all share in the profits, but we're all going to take far less salary, but we're going to survive through this process. So there's a lot of new thinking we need to start, in the process going forward. So the last thing you need to do is look at retrenchments, because Wayne can tell us it's not a cheap exercise, at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So, Doc, you're presenting a thought that used to sound quite futuristic a few months ago, but now really that co-creation model is live and accessible to us all in our environment. Yeah. In a country like South Africa, where before lockdown, we were challenging each other and having quite robust conversations about various aspects of our society. The bridge is trust. And from a facilitation and a negotiation point of view, that really is what requires to be harnessed at the outset as we enter into the new normal. So we've got the value chain with new entrants, young graduates who are hungry to finish the academic year, probably going to graduate soon, and wanting to enter into the job market, which now looks very different. We've got people in their mid-age careers. Some of them might have reached that difficult 40 zone where they're rethinking who they are, where they're going to for the remainder of their career. And then we've got those, and it's a growing cohort, the retirees, who are required by law to retire at either 60 or 65, in some cases maybe 70, but who are still so sharp-minded, so experienced, and have so much to give back into society. From your perspectives, how do you see this playing out? And what are the opportunities that the current crisis presents so that we can look at this from a different point of view? Wayne?
Yeah, Rosh, obviously it's a buyer's market now in terms of hiring people, because you have a lot of people out there and, with skills that may have been retrenched and so on. And that's going to make it quite difficult for youngsters to get into the market, because they're going to be competing with people of a lot more experience who might be prepared to take a lower salary and so on. So that was just the one comment I wanted to make. The youngsters going into the market now, it's going to be a lot more competitive, and you might find a lot of them actually rethinking about going into a conventional work environment, maybe considering going into their own business, an informal business and so on, which I think is quite difficult to do given our bureaucracy in this country. SMEs are not really very well catered for. So I think it's going to be very important for youth to be creative, make sure that they get something on their CVs, make sure even if they have to volunteer their services. I know I had to do that as a young man trying to find work, just to get some kind of experience and perhaps making sure that on your CV that you are a lot more skills-based in terms of listing what you can do, because I think organizations are going to be combining your traditional positions that you used to have a very neat box. You're an engineer or you're an accountant or whatever the case might be. There's going to be multi-skilling taking place, and you might be called on to be an engineer and a salesperson. So make sure that your CV reflects that kind of change. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the whole job market pans out going forward. It's very different to what we used to, and I think we need to just be very creative in how we approach that in future.
Thank you. Sharon, what are you seeing? Sorry, Doctor. Dennis?
Just to add to that, I think the opportunities are now for collaboration. I'm even talking about individual collaboration. There's a lot of, let's say, older people or more age or with other experiences that can now sit around the table, and you can start creating kind of incubation environments and say, let's pull these ideas and then let's see how can our skills fit in to start creating these opportunities. So they are there. I know for a fact in our environment we're sitting with many retired people that are engineers and school teachers and etc. And we're sitting with many young people, specifically at Nelson Mandela University, with coming out of university, not getting jobs. But there's such an opportunity for coaching now to start taking place on an individual level, and then to take it further from there. So I think there is definitely a lot of opportunities, and we also need to ensure that we utilize the seeders and all these government entities where you can get funding for cooperatives, for example. So cooperatives is a big thing in creating those business opportunities. So we just need to look out there. They are there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, so Sharon, from your side, if you're a young job seeker, the stats are sobering. I mean, National Treasury is projecting that unemployment could rise by 50%. We're looking at projections to 2023 of about 35%. 8.2 million of SA's youth out of work between 15 to 34. And the government has invested a lot of money in 4IR and readied ourselves for that from a intent perspective. But our education systems need to prepare our graduates and even the teachers for a new future. What are you seeing in the young job seekers, Sharon, from your perspective?
So, I'm going to also be a bit philosophical here. So we're in an ecosystem, right? And with this disruption that we've seen, there have been major shifts that have happened in terms of just the climate around securing and accessing work opportunities. So there's one group of young people who have caught up with this change and are aware that there are jobs that were not traditionally there before. But, I can get onto YouTube, I can do marketing, I can be an influencer, I can do all sorts of things. So that's one trajectory. There's also a movement towards people taking on multiple jobs. There's also a shift towards people utilizing skills that they have, to earn an income. So people are starting to be very creative around how they can earn an income. Then disruption like COVID-19 has shown the vast inequality in our country. It's shown the gap that is so wide. So if I am going to find job opportunities, I need access. I need data. I need to have the skills to look at the different websites to see what is there. I saw an advert for Amazon recently. So they're looking for telesales agents. You work from home, but the specifics of the internet requirements, not many people are going to be able to meet that, But here's a job which you could do from home. You could also be studying at the same time. But the reality of actually being able to do that is not possible within our current context. And also when we're talking about remote working, it's not a reality for everyone. So there's a chunk of our population that is being left behind, maybe because the type of skills they have require face-to-face and need to be actually doing the work and can't do it from home. Secondly, issue of skills, issue of access to data, the costs. So there's so many layers in terms of the exclusions that are coming, financial exclusions. So maybe I know how to bake scones and I want to start, but I need seed funding of 1,000 rand to get me going. Where do I get that? So the ecosystem, one shift happens, it impacts everybody. So there's a mix. I'm seeing people taking on like the Uber deliveries. So you've got a full-time job, but you also work for Take-A-Lot, you work for Uber, and you're supplementing your income. Older people are also doing that. So there's definitely a shift towards saying, what else can I do to supplement the income? Where I can work a few hours for this employer and then work a couple of hours for the next person. So we have to be creative. The old maps are not going to get us anywhere.
If there are any young job seekers on the show today, please submit your questions and comments. We'd actually love to hear your perspective. Dennis, what struck me during lockdown was the work that the George Business Chamber was doing. Very practical, on the ground advice for SMEs, almost showing them the next steps. And I found that during lockdown, those who were able to find something to do that seemed like it may have a constructive outcome were more energized to make it through to the next day. Talk to us a little bit about those programs that you ran, and especially as they address the issue of youth unemployment.
What we try to do is, first of all, just to get information from the people where they're at and what's going to happen, and hence the surveys. And we took the results of the surveys, and we also, first of all, we encourage them, go, speak to your people, in your team, speak to your creditors, speak to the bank, speak to your debtors, all of those, go and speak and get the conversation going. Because I think that's part in Sharon's field where you start at least starting to admit I've got a problem, and you start having the discussion there with those people. So from that, we started capitalizing and say, well, people are talking about, I need to have business continuity plans. So we said, well, okay, here's a framework. Let's start with business continuity plans. And so we took each of those steps and we tried to put stuff in place for them to do. But the important part is that, from the office side where Ingrid and Mary Ann said, they were available. So people could go to someone as a go-to person to say, well, where do I find this? How do I do that? And we could also do the follow-up for them. So those were just the practical aids where we are. But we're trying to get very quickly to a point where we said, well, okay, let's accept that COVID is here. We need to move on. And we know that we're going to be oscillating between all these feelings, but let's accept it's here and let's start moving on. And I think it's in that moving on where we started, generating co-ideas with the people. So let me ask just ourselves, what is the fastest growing sector that Harvard Business identified for the year 2022? The economic sector. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Hello, start.
Geriatrics. We're a population, it's an aging population. So how many people listening in or us in the panel have thought of and analyzed the geriatric environment to say, but what services do those people need? Now, I don't need to be fancily, have, qualifications, etc. So what do those people need? They need someone, they need carers, they need a gardener, they need someone to drive them around, make appointments for them. So the point that we started saying, asking the people to think out of the box, think of the other stuff that you can be doing and enter into it. And then lastly, just the comment was also start working together, collaborate. If I'm good at, here's a business here, they're in printing, 3D printing, and they identified and they started making these 3D masks, these plastic masks, etc., etc. Is he making a lot of money? No, but the company is surviving. So we need to think differently.
So I think at the moment what I'm hearing is, Sharon, people are changing within themselves. They're probably re-exploring what they like, what their purpose is, where they could be going to because we have the time. And there's something that unites us at the moment in that everyone honestly is in this together. And the vulnerabilities that we felt a little bit awkward showing and talking about in our corporate spaces, in our business suits, etc., this has almost allowed that to come out and flow a little bit. So there's a bit of catharsis happening internally. And I guess organizations, because they're going to be needing to look at their business models slightly differently from a cash flow perspective, but also business sustainability perspective, there's also internal reflection happening. I love what you're saying about a creative economy. I think it's within each of us to find and utilize that creativity. And systemically, it's about the avenues. So I'm thinking about the youth employment services that's been doing some great job over the past years. And right now where companies are, how can that be leveraged so that for these young graduates coming through the system, we create a channel for their talent and their expertise and to really provide an experiential base for those, because it's exceptionally lonely trying to build a career as an independent entrepreneur. Wayne, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like the thought of being unified. As you say, we're in this together, and it's something that Dennis touched on as well in terms of associations. And even as a businessman, I rely on associations. I work for competitors in PE because it's not viable for them to operate down here, and vice versa. I use competitors in other areas. So I think the world that we're in, and I'll just go back to the corporate environment, we've been pushed into a situation where something is changing in the team dynamic. There's hard drama, and with that, we're either going to have risk and opportunity. So the risk is, and I'll go back to your quote earlier on, where you might have a big company that's taking advantage of the TERS payouts, for example, because they're topping up their profits as opposed to just trying to keep the doors open. That will come back to bite them because their staff won't forget that. In the good times when there's other jobs, they won't forget it. But the opportunity is that when you're going through adversity together, brothers in arms in a battle, for example, that team becomes cemented. And it's very good for industrial relations. If you can get management and unions or staff talking more and finding opportunities within the corporate environment to bring youngsters in on an internship basis, even if they don't have a program. Just give the kids an opportunity to get 2 or 3 months on their CV. I think that might be part of the new dialogue that has to take place. How can we do something for the economy and for the greater community?
Thanks, Wayne. I mean, Sharon, from your side, you also run a lot of facilitation sessions. And were there any examples prior to lockdown or during lockdown where you are engaging with a group of people within a business context? Some of them are at the end of their careers and some of them are just starting afresh. And how did that co-creation space look? And how should it look right now?
So I think what I've found, interesting, in these different spaces is just the acknowledgement of how people have been shaken out of their comfort zones. I think, COVID-19 is just a catalyst, but all the shifts were already happening. We had caught wind of this some time ago, but we just thought we had more time. So just rethinking, the conversations have shifted. So we have people, like you're saying, who are almost on their way out in terms of retirement, but are saying, how else can we transfer the skills? And renegotiating in terms of access. So I've seen companies who are saying, yes, we can take on young people to get some experience, pay them a minimal allowance, or instead of retrenching people, let's renegotiate the contracts and say you're like a freelancer. You come in for a specific project. That way you still get a little bit of money. Sadly, we also have the unethical people who are trying to maximize in this situation, but we hope the ones that are wanting to co-create and seeing that the only way to survive is to work with other people are going to be more. So more people are willing to work with others, which has been great. So even across competition, the abundance mentality, I think, is increasing, where people are sharing the skills. People are not charging, but really just being so generous with their time and saying, look, this is what I do. If it can help you in any way, there you go. So yeah, it's been an interesting space of co-creation.
That's a beautiful image, Sharon, that in a situation that is glaring with the various constraints, that the abundance principle is coming to the fore and almost fueling the collaboration approach. So let's look at 3 things in terms of a new normal and perhaps a humanized approach to the new normal. Around safe workspaces, constructive employee relations, and then the principle of human capital management as opposed to HR. Wayne, Dennis, and Sharon, if I'm a business leader, whether it's a large business or an SME, and I have just opened my doors last Monday, and I know that I'm going to need to make it through the next 6 or 9 months and beyond that. And ultimately, I want to retain as many of my employees as possible because they're really good people. And I also want to create opportunities for the young people coming in. From the point of safe workspace, constructive engagement, and from human capital, what should we be thinking about as business leaders?
So if I just want to start on human capital versus HR, all of that. For me, it's it must be people management or people leadership. So people is not an asset. This thing that people say that my biggest asset is my people. That's nonsense. People, asset comes on in your books and you write it off over time. People you need to invest in as you go along. My proposal to any business person now is give shares, give ownership of your business to the people. Okay. I'm not saying everything, but share ownership, because when there's ownership, then there's going to be a different commitment, and that also changes how I'm going to reward you. Your remuneration model starts changing. So that's just a quick comment.
Okay, so that's nice. That's talking about inclusive economy, Dennis.
Yeah.
That's what you're alluding to. Awesome. Wayne, from an employee relations point of view?
Rosh, I think it's important to build teams now. As we were talking about earlier, get to know your staff. They're very different to what they were 3 months ago. They've got issues at home. Even if they're working from home, they now have school-going children tagging on them while they're working, and they've got their own set of fears and stresses. Get to know your staff, build that staff, understand what your culture is, even if you're in a small business. And if you need to recruit, bring people in that are aligned with that culture, even if they're coming cheap now. Make sure that you're bringing people in that are going to stay with you going forward. And right now, survival is okay. You don't need to make a profit. To me, just make sure your team are intact and try and build your team. People over profits, as you say. And yeah, to me, it's going to build and center on your team that you build right now, that you can go forward with when the business starts coming in.
Thank you. Sharon, at the heart of it are the people, the trust, and how do you create that safe space for people to thrive?
So I think for me, it's the issue of communication. It's absolutely critical in this time, especially as things are so uncertain. People need you to tell them, this is where we are. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but this is what I know. The transparency, it will go a long way. The honesty will go a long way. If you are worried about stuff, also help them know. So part of that inclusivity is to say, this is ours to share. This is ours to solve together, because as the business owner, you might see a solution from your lens, but from, your staff's perspective, they might also have solutions that you haven't thought about. So I think it's important to take your staff along, talk to people, take time to check in on one another. Self-care is going to be important for everybody. So taking time to just pause, to reflect, to rest. And part of, what's also happening is people are just being busy for the sake of it. And it's a defense mechanism. I want to be relevant, so I'm going to work for all these crazy hours. I don't know how to adjust if I'm working from home. When do I stop? So it's to have those tough conversations to say, we don't need to be sending emails at all hours of the day. Can we just press pause? Can we just redefine what work means for me? If I've got children at home, maybe the morning is going to be difficult. That's okay. Output is what we're concerned about. So even the performance management has to adapt, and have the conversation so that people can manage the expectation of what you are looking for as the employer and the quality and just the timing of everything. So communication at the heart of it.
Yep.
Sharon, thank you so much. I'd love to hear a lot more about this and unpack it, because it's a whole new journey that I think we're all embarking on as business leaders. And, at the heart of it, from what the three of you are saying, is the aspect of being comfortable that the leaders at the moment don't all have the answers. It's about looking at a co-creation model, doing things differently, looking at an inclusive economy, Dennis. Sharon, from your side, really starting to live your values and being authentic about that. And then from Wayne's side, every time I speak to you, Wayne, the principle of resilience keeps shining through. That it's that old adage of this too shall pass. And how are you going to use this process to reinvent yourself, to recalibrate yourself to your purpose? And really start to thrive on the other side of this. So really, panelists, thank you so much for giving up your morning to be with us today. It's been a very rich conversation with a lot of food for thought. And thank you for our participants for sharing your virtual coffee time with us. I hope it has been informative and insightful. I read something that really touched me over the weekend. It was a short but very powerful quote that was written by an ex-colleague of mine, Shlanshla Kwabe, who's the founder and director of Muntamo HR services based in Johannesburg. He said this: If you still have a job, be grateful. If you have lost your job, remember that when one door closes, surely another door will open. If you have been unemployed and looking for a job, don't lose hope. Keep pushing and trying. It's better than trying and not doing anything other than doing just that. So thank you very much to all of you for being with us. Join us again in July when we'll be looking at social entrepreneurship. The link in the today's webinar will be posted on our YouTube pages. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, StratConnect, Facebook. And Sharon, if people would like to get hold of you, what are your contact details?
So you can just Google Sharon Munyaka Inc. And we are available on LinkedIn. We've got a webpage on Facebook, on Twitter. So we will be available to you when you need to get hold of us.
Fantastic. And Sharon also works countrywide, not only in Johannesburg. Dennis, your contact details, please.
Yeah, just go onto our website. It's alpha, with the F, A-L-F-A, omega.co.za, and you will find us there.
Thank you. Wayne, where can people reach you?
Yeah, very similar to Dennis. So it's Alpha Labor. If you just Google us, Alpha Labor Solutions, and also Bridge Labor Solutions, and you'll be able to get hold of them.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and may you thrive. To all of you who did participate today, please feel free to leave your comments in the chat box, and we'll give consideration to how we can bring you topics that are of interest to you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.